Hi, good morning. I'm going to read to you the case file on page 27 and 28 of your textbook. It's called Dr. Coppolino's Deadly House Calls. A frantic late-night telephone call to Dr. Juliet Caro brought her to the Longport Key, Florida home of Drs. Carl and Carmela Coppolino, so they were both doctors. Carl had called for Dr. Caro's help because he believed Carmela was dying. He said she had complained of chest pains earlier in the evening, and he was certain that she had suffered a heart attack. Dr. Caro arrived to find Carmela beyond help. Although Dr. Caro felt that the scene in the room appeared staged, and her own observations of Carmela's body did not support Carl's claim of heart trouble, she agreed to sign the 32-year-old Carmela's death certificate. Dr. Caro cited coronary occlusion, which basically means heart attack, as the cause of death, but reported the death to local police department. The investigating officer was satisfied that Dr. Caro had correctly listed the cause of death, so he didn't apply the law that required an autopsy be performed. The medical examiner could not order an autopsy without a request from the police or the district attorney, neither of which was forthcoming. Thus, Carmela Coppolino's body, unexamined by police, was buried in her family's plot in her home in the state of New Jersey. A little more than a month later, Carl married a moneyed socialite, Mary Gibson. News of Carl's marriage infuriated Marjorie Farber, a former New Jersey neighbor of Dr. Coppolino, who had been having an affair with the good doctor. Soon Marjorie had an interesting story to recount to investigators. Her husband's death 2 years before, although ruled to be from natural causes, had actually been a murder. Carl, an anesthesiologist, had given Marjorie a syringe containing some medication and told her to inject her husband William while he was sleeping. Ultimately, Marjorie claimed she was unable to inject the full dose and called Carl, who finished the job by suffocating William with a pillow. In a cruel and ironic twist, Carl called his wife, Carmela, to sign William Farber's death certificate. She listed the cause of death at Carl's insistence as coronary artery disease. This type of death is common, especially in men in their 50s. Such deaths are rarely questioned, and the Department of Health accepted the certificate without inquiry. Marjorie Farber's astonishing story was supported in part by Carl's recent increase in his wife's life insurance. Carmela's $65,000 policy, along with his new wife's fortune, would keep Dr. Coppolino in high society for the rest of his life. Based on this information, authorities in New Jersey and Florida now obtained exhumation orders for both William Farber and Carmela Coppolino. Exhume means dig up the dead body. After examination of both bodies, Dr. Coppolino was charged with the murders of William and Carmela. Officials decided to try Dr. Coppolino first in New Jersey for the murder of William Farber. Dr. Coppolino was represented by the famous...
I need you to call 31004, please, ma'am.
Coppolino was represented by the famous defense attorney F. Lee Bailey. That's the same guy that was on the O.J. Simpson defense team. The Farber autopsy did not reveal any evidence of poisoning, but seemed to show strong evidence of strangulation. The absence of toxicological findings left the jury to deliberate the conflicting medical expert testimony versus the sensational story told by a scorned and embittered woman. In the end, Bailey secured an acquittal for his client. Okay, so not guilty for William Farber. The Florida trial presented another chance to bring Carl Coppolino to justice. Florida officials called on the experienced New York City medical examiner, Dr. Milton Halpern, and his colleague, toxicologist, Dr. Charles Umberger, to determine how Carl Coppolino had killed his wife. Recalling Dr. Coppolino's career as an anesthesiologist, Halpern theorized that Coppolino had exploited his access to the many potent drugs used during surgery to commit these murders, specifically an injectable paralytic agent called succinylcholine chloride. After having Carmela's body exhumed, Halpern examined her body with a magnifying glass in search of an injection site. He found that Carmela had been injected in her left buttock shortly before her death. Dr. Umberger's mission as a toxicologist in this case was to prove the administration of succinylcholine chloride by chemical analysis of Carmela's tissues. This presented a serious problem because succinylcholine was purported to be untraceable in human tissue. The drug breaks down in the body to succinic acid and choline, both of which are naturally occurring chemicals in the human body. The chemical method necessary to make this determination did not exist at the time of the murder. And if you didn't already know, these murders took place in the mid-60s. Ultimately, Dr. Umberger developed a completely novel procedure for detecting succinylcholine chloride. He isolated elevated levels of succinic acid in Carmela's brain, which proved that she had received a large dose of the paralytic drug shortly before her death. This evidence, along with the findings of the same drug residues in the injection site on her buttock, was presented in the Florida murder trial of Dr. Carl Coppolino, who was convicted of second-degree murder. On appeal, the defense raised an interesting point of law. Can a defendant be convicted of murder based on a series of tests that were specifically devised for that case? Tests that had indirectly showed that Carmela had been injected with succinylcholine chloride never before had been used in a criminal trial. The court ruled that the novelty of the scientific method does not preclude its significance to a criminal prosecution. Just because an otherwise valid method was developed specifically for this trial and had not yet been proven in court did not mean that the murderer should be allowed to get away with the perfect crime. The conviction of Dr. Coppolino was upheld. So he did eventually go to prison for committing one of those murders. I hope you enjoyed this story, and I hope this helps you get a better idea of why we're reading about what we're reading today, which is the role of the forensic scientist and all of the different things that they do. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.